I'm going to share with you today the what I'm calling the human development model of philosophical practice, and in this specific case, I'm applying that model into supporting business executives during crisis. This is actually, by the way, a model that I have applied with a group of executives in Brazil. I teach philosophy at a Brazilian business school, and there are some insights from applying that model with those executives. At the end, during the discussion, if you so wish, we could talk about that as well. So, what is the point of this model? And I think philosophical practice towards business executives in general. On my view, it has to do with the relevance of the contribution. In working in terms of the development of the character of business executives have kind of a wave function to it. It reverberates strongly into the rest of society. There have been a recent study from Oxfam, according to which out of the 100 largest economies in the world, 71 are corporations and only 29 are nations. So you can see the power of influence that corporations have. And it's interesting because if you look at the same study from Oxfam over its different versions, you can see not only that the number of corporations are getting larger in terms of the total proportion of the 100 largest economies, but also they are climbing the ladder. So if you get the top 20, you will see in the last version of the study more corporations than you saw in the previous version. And what is the contribution from this model, the human development model of the philosophical practice for the development of business executives? I think that it can be beautifully translated when we are thinking about how to apply that model in terms of crisis. It can be beautifully expressed by this quote from Confucius, which is, "A lion chased me up a tree and I greatly enjoyed the view from the top." So if the model, the work through the model succeeds in terms of inculcating that attitude in those business executives, I would say that would be a successful application of the model. What is the job here in terms of philosophical practice towards business executives? I would say the main job is giving them glasses. It is supporting them in developing the capacity to see things more clearly. Because being a philosopher working in a business school have gave me the perspective of acknowledging that in most cases the poor choices that business executives seems to be making that have destructive consequences to society as a whole and to the communities in which they operate is not because they are bad people, And it's also not because they are not trying to do what they think is the right thing for them to do. It's coming from the virtue ethics kind of insight that I will come back to later. The job seems to be developing, supporting their development in such a way that they develop this sensitivity to perceive which are the morally relevant features of situations. They just are blind in some sense to a part of the relevant features, and they overemphasize because they believe they have moral obligation with the company. They overemphasize the financial health of the corporation and do not take into account the impact of their choices into other agents involved in the choice that they are making. And that is a beautifully synthesized by a brilliant strategy professor from INSEAD called Subramanian Hangan, when he proposes his theory of a shift of paradigm in capitalism from the perspective of corporations. He proposes that the new paragraph, the old paradigm focuses exclusively in the economic and financial health of the corporation, and we need to shift that paradigm in which we integrate at the same time economic performance of the company and the progress of society, and truly integrate them into the main activities of the corporation. We are not talking about charity work or social responsibility or anything like that. We are talking about the business itself. Again, the job here is, in this sense, giving them glasses in terms of developing the capacity to see clearly. And as I said, that involves developing the sensitivity to perceive the relevant features of situations, and this idea that executives are already sensitive to, by the way. Not all of them, but many of them, they just don't know how to do it. And that's where philosophical practice can come in, I believe. This idea of integrating economic performance and social progress in their core business, not as a kind of side charity thing that the company is doing. So this model that I'm presenting is supposed to face a problem. And I would say there is a general problem for business executives. And mind you, that I mostly have in mind the top leadership of corporations when I'm presenting this model here. So the general problem is executives are constantly faced with truly hard decisions to be made. And they are faced with ethical dilemmas, and the kinds of decisions that they need to make, and the way in which they make those decisions many times generate internal conflicts in them. And on these three aspects, I think philosophical practice can be very useful to them. So what I mean is, for example, it's really interesting if you go into Google and look for the former president of Xerox, the company, and the former CEO of Starbucks, they both say precisely the same thing with the exact same words, which is the most difficult day of my professional life was when I had to dismiss a large number of employees. Again, hard decision. They believe they must do it because that will make the corporation more efficient, and sometimes it will actually allow it to survive, but at the same time that generate a profound internal conflict in ethical terms. And what I'm suggesting in this particular presentation with this model directed towards crisis situations is those problems are even intensified to a larger degree. So the decisions become even harder, and they must be done at the heat of the moment many times, as is happening right now with the global pandemic situation. And allow me to say, sometimes there is a dilemma in terms of the economic performance of the company and, let's put it, a ethical way of choosing, ethical way of deciding within a certain situation. But many times it's truly, and we can talk about examples of that at the end during the discussion if you so wish. It's truly proper moral dilemmas, dilemmas within morality, as Peter Winch would say. And why I'm suggesting that philosophical practice is a wonderful tool to support business executives to deal with the general problem and with periods of crisis in particular. First of all, because of the nature of the difficulties that they face, the nature of the challenges. So it involves decision making and many times under pressure. So that is coming from a kind of critical thinking approach. And also it involves dealing with real life moral dilemmas, both in the sense of ethical dilemmas that they need to choose at choose during the situation that they are right now inside, and sometimes elaborating, working out, resolving internal conflicts generated from past choices that they have made. And also, I want to suggest that philosophical practice is a wonderful approach to support business executives because it would provide the proper structure, the proper background to transforming those difficulties into opportunities. More explicitly, the opportunity to develop their decision making capacity and the opportunity to develop their character, meaning their ability to deal with these ethical dilemmas and with the moral internal conflicts generated by the choices that they are making. Now, there is an even, so this is kind of the explicit work that executives will immediately see, but there is an even more profound, I think, justification for wanting to use philosophical practice as a way of supporting business executives especially in moments of crisis. And it comes from the value of crisis and hardship in human life. So one way of putting it is the Chinese understanding of the term crisis, which is a combination between the idea of danger, surrounding danger, and the opportunity. And I think that is beautifully expressed by this image from a Brazilian philosopher called Rubem Alves. He says, "Happy oysters make no pearls." And what he means with this image is literally the oyster is supposed to be perfect or impenetrable, but some of them have a little crack in them that allows a grain of sand to get inside. And that grain of sand hurts the oyster. It scratches its skin and hurts it. So the oyster will envelop that grain of sand with something that will later become the pearl. So happy oysters make no pearls. And that is the essence of the human development model, which is transforming difficulties and hardships and using that as a substance, using the crisis as a substance, as fuel for the human flourishing of the individual, which is actually, this is just a mistake. So this is the appropriate slide. So the essence, crisis as fuel for human flourishing. And in the human development model that of philosophical practice that I'm proposing here, and mind you, it's a work in progress. I am proposing that there is a specific framework within philosophy that is extremely helpful in those terms, and it is the virtue ethics framework. Specifically, I rely on the virtue ethics notion that development happens through practice. So, this idea coming from Aristotle, you develop in your character the virtue of courage by acting as a courageous person would act. You practice acting courageously. The same goes for the virtue of prudence in terms of how you develop it in your character. And my particular interpretation of phronesis or practical wisdom, and this is why I use as example these two virtues, courage and prudence, because for me, practical wisdom allows the person to discern. It is coming from Socrates' unity of the virtues thesis. It allows the person to discern when the relevant, when the situation is asking for a courageous response, and when it's asking for a prudent response, or the combination of both, because just simply acting courageously in every situation is not courage, is stupidity. Now, business executives are very pragmatic creatures. So they will appreciate the support in solving their real life problems. And that is a virtue of this model, because the material from which the work is done is exactly by dealing with working with the real life problems that those business executives are facing at the moment, in either in terms of the decisions that they need to make, or the residue of their past decisions in terms of internal conflicts. The work that they do perceive is, supporting them in solving those real life problems, as I just said. But over the process, during the process, they also notice a kind of development that happens through practice. As we go on session after session, they do notice an increase in their capacity for decision making, and they also do notice decision, or an increase or a development in their the ability to deal with moral dilemmas. And here I'm already sharing the insight of applying this model with a group of executives. What they might not see at first or so immediately is what, for the philosophical practitioner that is conducting the process, has as its, I would suggest, main goal really is the human flourishing, is the process of their self-realization that is happening at the background of this work. So the basic structure that I propose for this model is actually a mix between individual philosophical counseling sessions and group work. I particularly start with an individual philosophical counseling session and end the process with the individual philosophical counseling session. And in between them, we will have those group sessions. The main aim of the initial individual session is at the same time to clarify any sort of doubt that the executive might have uh, about the work itself, what is going to happen. It also serves as a way of breaking the ice, because it's a little bit like if you start straight from the group sessions, it's a little bit like just throwing them at the sea and saying, swim, do your thing, just swim there. No, there is a kind of discomfort that presents a barrier for the group, the dynamics of the group to work more fluidly. And the initial session is a way of already breaking a little bit of the ice in terms of that barrier, so that when they get to the first group session, they are slightly more at ease, which is essential for the success of the work, because that will actually allow the participants to truly, genuinely open up and share what they have to share. They are feeling a context of trust. They are being confident in the group, will make a huge difference in terms of how successful the work is. And at the end, the final individual session, the main, the initial individual session also is important for the philosophical practitioner to get a sense of each one of the participants, both in terms of a general picture of the person, but also specific issues that that person might be facing, and that might be useful later on for the group work. The final individual session, I think, has three main objectives. One of them is just connecting any losing ends in terms of the whole work that have been done. The second very, very important function of it is in the group, they share their individual issues, but as a whole, the discussion remains at a general level. So the last individual philosophical counseling session helps a lot in terms of bringing that material, those insights, into the particular reality of that participant, and also as a way of helping them to understand how they can apply those insights in a practical way in their own life. So I actually see the structure as a kind of personalized group work kind of thing. The group sessions, they have a kind of building up effect. Again, there is a dynamics of the group in which build must be, or trust, sorry, must be built. And that will allow the participants both to consciously choose to open up and properly present their real life issues, but also, and I think it's very important, part of the job of the philosophical practitioner is to, at the subconscious or unconscious level, they really need to feel that they can trust that space that the philosophical practitioner creates, because that will allow them to open up even to themselves. So perhaps the first step, or one major aspect of honesty, is the ability to be honest with oneself. And this is the kind of thing I'm referring to at the moment. In terms of the role of the philosophical practitioner in the whole process, I think there are a few main jobs to be done. One of them is to provide the structure, the appropriate conditions for the work to happen. And that relates to, when I say the work to happen, I think a lot of the work actually has to do with the exchange of experiences between participants. So the discussion that happens between them. And I think this pandemic, applying this model during this pandemic, made that very evident to me, because what will happen is they are facing situations that they haven't anticipated. So again, at the heat of the moment, but at the same time, some of those situations are new to them, or at least they don't see how those situations, those choices that need to be made, relate with past choices that were made. And literally, one can give insights to the other in terms of sharing their experiences. One may have a solution to one current problem of the other one, but also the discussions that have happened in a certain group session might become relevant in the future in terms of a situation that presents itself to one of the participants of the group. Again, the whole idea here, and that's why it's so important that we are dealing with real life experiences from participants, and the notion of practice. So it's a kind of joint exercise of practice in critical thinking and practice in dealing with ethical dilemmas and practice with having the courage of facing internal conflicts presented by or generated by past decisions to themselves, against self-honesty, and the next step of bringing that into the group, and then that being accommodated by the group is just really truly a beautiful experience, because suddenly, while they were afraid of being judged, and they were judging themselves, and they were ashamed of the choices that they have made, and so on and so forth, now they are being accommodated, and they are not being judged, and those insights from past poor choices are being now used as a way of developing their characters in order to make better decisions in the future. I appreciate that, again, from applying the model with a specific groups. In this case, there were 5 CEOs of organizations, multilateral organizations, all of them. Uh, they appreciate that a lot. So part of the job of the philosophical practitioner is to provide this structure and the condition, and I here use the word optimal exchange of experiences, and that's an art. Really over the sessions, the group sessions, the dynamic of the group really developed a lot. So, for example, uh, in the beginning, I would provoke something like a discussion. Each one of them would respond individually according to their own experience. In the middle of the process, uh, after a few group sessions, they were already discussing among themselves whenever someone shared an experience or insight. So it was not only a dialogue of each one with me. And by the end of it, they're really truly uh, sharing things that the choices that they have made in the past that they were profoundly ashamed of, and according to what some of them said, haunt them till this day. And in the space of the group, we were able to elaborate a little bit on that. Now, the job is not only to provide a safe space, it's also, and that makes a huge difference in the process, to guide the collective reasoning. So you allow it to, let's imagine like a spiral that keeps after each round coming up. So the philosophical practitioner, with its interventions and with its guidance, is the one that is allowing the spiral to go on in terms of the elevation of the discussion and the elevation of the frequency, let's say, of each one of the participants of the group, and it is extremely powerful. They appreciate it so much, the ability to enrich their own discussions with the appropriate philosophical insight and perspective. So when I also teach philosophy in the same business school, when you are teaching a course in the traditional way, they like it, it's nice and all that, but it's no big deal really. But when you bring those philosophical insights in the middle of a powerful discussion that they are having, as a way of, first you kind of connect the different points that they are bringing in, and organize it into a consistent whole, so you interpret what they are saying in a consistent whole, and you add to that the right kind of philosophical insight that is extremely, extremely enriching for them. Uh, let me say something about autonomy here, because I think that's a very relevant point, and it is a responsibility of the philosophical practitioner that is applying this process. Uh, One of the, if we are talking about human flourishing and human development, and the development of the ability for decision making, or developing their critical thinking capacity, and if we are talking about their developing their ability to deal with moral dilemmas and internal conflicts generated by choices that they have made in the past, and choices that they need to make now. Because sometimes when you're talking about a very high level in the hierarchy of a company, there is no way, no direction to run, right? There is a decision to be made. It is a brutal decision, and they are the one with the formal responsibility to make that decision. Okay, so that I would like to suggest that reinforcing the autonomy of those business executives is uh, essential. It's a key part of the work, and the actual contribution that this model can give. Uh, so there are a few points that I wanted to make about that. One of them is really attributing the proper value to the experiences that these executives already have. And I think that resonates really well with the notion of human flourishing, right? Already have a lot inside of them. The job is not to impose anything external into them, but rather support them in bringing out the potential, the insights, the talents, and the humanity that is already in them. And part of that can be done through giving the appropriate value to the experiences that they have for different reasons. I think I gave one illustration. One can actually help to solve the problem of the other. Uh, in a pedagogical point of view, if instead of just sharing an idea, you are allowing them to share an experience, and then you are together with the group elaborating on that experience uh, through critical thinking, through an ethical approach, ethical reflection, uh, and things like that, and the actual exercise of decision making, collective decision making, and one supporting the other, and all these different pieces there. That is a very powerful thing. Indeed, it does have a lot of value, and they will feel valued. I have been talking about creating an optimal space for the work to happen in terms of the group dynamics and exchanges and elaborations and collective reflections. Uh, they are feeling valued and appreciated with what they already have contributes a lot in terms of that. For instance, in terms of allowing them to trust the group and to open up, and that's when the magic really starts to happen. uh, Another point that I wanted to make about autonomy is we as philosophical practitioners, on my personal view, have the responsibility of avoiding that a dependency relationship between the participant and the philosophical practitioner, or even the participant and the group is formed. Not to extend myself too much, because I want to leave space for discussion here. For one, that would undo part of the work that you as a philosophical practitioner so carefully worked to build the foundation, the space that you have created, and the reinforcement of the autonomy of the person and the contribution in terms of the process of their own human flourishing. And one specific suggestion that I have in terms of that is we can, and I use the final individual philosophical counseling session for that as well. So I said the objective of that final individual philosophical counseling session is connecting losing ends. First of all, actually, let me say four things. One is providing a space for them to express what they need or want to express about the whole process. That's one thing. That will help to connect losing ends about the insights that emerged during the work. Also, extremely important, uh, helping it, helping them to bring those insights into their particular context, according or taking into account the particular person that they are, and all of that, and helping them to foresee a way or come up with a system in which they can make those insights practical into their own lives. But a specific kind of suggestion that I have is, I think it is a wonderful contribution of the work if at the end of it you provide each one of the participants with some kind of guidance or some kind of instrument that will allow them to continue the work that we have started in the group by themselves. Because again, we do not want to create any kind of dependency relationship between the participant and the philosophical practitioner. On the contrary, we want to reinforce their autonomy, develop their own critical thinking capacities, develop their own ethical sensitivity and ability to deal with ethical dilemmas, and that would reverberate beautifully into society as a whole. So that is my email address right there. I will actually copy it and leave it in the chat. But also, I would like right now to open the floor for a discussion among all of us. Okay, no, I think so the first question, and I will go through the chat questions, but if anyone would like to jump into the discussion as well, please feel free. So, isn't social responsibility something of the corporation itself? Uh, there is a distinction. I think I see what you mean, but there is a very important distinction to be made from the point of view of business structure and business strategy. Uh, Suppose you are a mining company. It will be understood by the executives of that mining company that their core business is mining. And whenever they are making the calculation in terms of how to make decisions, the aspects, the features of the situation that they will tend to take into account will be mostly economic, related to economic performance. I'm talking about the main pieces of the operation of that company, right? When they are providing the business, when they're developing the product or providing and selling the product and providing the service that they are providing. They might have, and that is even separated in terms of the very structure of the company. It's organized in this way. You have the strategy kind of department thing, you have the marketing thing, and then you have the corporate social responsibility or the sustainability separate structure. And the good mining company in some sense that really genuinely is trying to do good here. They will support charity work, a certain charity that deals with the the I don't know, vulnerable children or something like that. And they will even sometimes plant trees if they are slightly more sensitive to the situation as a whole. But what I'm suggesting is, for instance, in terms of how they deal with the community, they are, to put it strongly, ruthless, and to put it more lightly, they just think the contribution that they are giving is providing jobs and raising to some extent the economic standard at that community. And I'm talking about real life mining companies and real life communities in Brazil that I have been working with here. Okay, so it's real life observation. Uh, the way they deal with the community will be ruthless. They will not take into account the actual needs of the community, even when they are trying to. And that's where I think philosophical practice comes in. They, to put it simply, to summarize the point, even when they are trying to be a good mining company, what they very much tend to do is to impose on the community what they believe is good for the community without taking into account what the community itself believes they need. Sorry, I will extend myself in the illustration here. There have been two major incidents in Brazil uh, with dam collapses. So the way mining companies operate is they have dams in which all the residue, all the remains of the mining activity, all the trash, the rubbish, they throw into the dam. Now, in recent years, I'm not talking about Brazil as a whole because in Brazil, in general, mining is a big thing. So if we only take my home state, there are many different states. Brazil is a big place. Only my home state in the last 15 years, 15, 1 5, there have been 8 dam collapses. In the most recent one, 1 hour drive away from my home here, 300 people died. The consequences not only for that community but all the other surrounding communities, because these are small communities, have been devastating. There are so many things to be said, but one of them is, for example, their agriculture is gone, and they were small farmers. They totally depended, but the whole thing is contaminated. They can't anymore do their farming. Now, okay, so there have been another, and this I think is a great illustration. A few years before, so this one, the last one, was beginning of 2019. In 2015, there was another dam collapse. Not so many people died, but huge effect impacting the communities in environmental terms and in their way of living. The word community applies in its original sense to those small villages because that's how they lived. They shared everything. It was one, I produce rice, your cow gives milk. We don't buy stuff from each other. We share. They lived like that. Okay. So dam collapses, the mud and whichever toxic thing was inside of it runs over the whole area. Now there are these kind of compensation efforts or something. So very interesting illustration. Uh, one company that is trying to make things right built this beautiful house, very large, almost a mansion, to this person that no longer have their house because it was run by the mud, and the area where that original house stays is interdicted. It's dangerous to be there, so people cannot live there. Okay, so this person goes and starts living in this huge house that for me looked beautiful. I went there and saw the house. It was amazing. The company believed that's a wonderful contribution that I'm giving. You know what actually happened? The person, after living 1 month in the house, became depressed. Literally, like clinically depressed. They felt really, really bad living in that big, fancy house. So what they did is, even though their old house was full of mud and in a risky area, they got their things and went back to live in their original house in the risky area. So what I mean by this distinction between integrating economic performance and social progress is to do it in the core business and to take into account in the decision making process not only of the social responsibility area of the company, but whoever is responsible for the strategy and whoever is responsible for sales and marketing. That's a new way. I was talking with this amazing CEO from Costa Rica the other day. He said, André, this thing about evolving to a new paradigm becomes very practical because before we measured success in terms of one dimension, economic performance. Now we measure it in terms of other dimensions as well. For us now, and that informs every decision that we make, we are being successful with not only that one dimension that we measure our success with a group of dimensions as opposed to only one dimension as we did before. And this is not me saying, is a very interesting CEO of a company from Costa Rica. The more responsible of the human is to take an integrated approach of application of himself practically. Harish, Indian, could you please clarify what you mean? I don't understand what you mean. The moral responsibility of the human is to take an integrated approach of application of himself practically. So if Harish is still there and wanted to comment. Lang Fang Liu. Apologies for the mispronunciation. It's a very uncommon name from the perspective of a Brazilian. Lang Fang Liu mentioned in Chinese culture, we believe a crisis could be a turning point, like an opportunity. And that's precisely where I'm coming from. And I'm actually trying to find videography in English that will elaborate on that perspective from Chinese culture. So if you could share that any kind of bibliography in terms of that would be extremely helpful, actually. There is a question to Lanfang Liu there. So if you want Lanfang to answer it, is it true that there is a hieroglyph in the Chinese with the twofold? Oh yeah, danger and opportunity. She can elaborate. I already know it is true. I don't know how to pronounce it, but I have been searching this stuff and it's there. Now I will continue with the chat, but listening to you, using the different senses might be enriching. So if someone wants to jump in and just ask a question, make a comment, otherwise we will come back to the chat.
Thank you for the wonderful presentation, André. And what I can say that from my own experience working in and for business, I can fully endorse what you've been talking about. So, that's my comment, and I'll leave the floor to other people. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Alexander. We have been in touch only since yesterday, but I can see you have really powerful, really helpful insights from our workshop yesterday that became evident to me. So I appreciate very much that you endorse it. It is an important feedback for me. Thank you very much. Please, Ezra.
Hi, André. Great to see you. Thank you. I had a question about the practice, first of all.
Yes.
Which was just about the sessions and whether you run them with a predetermined focus, particularly for the group sessions, or whether it's just focuses on what arises in the moment.
Yeah, I think that's a very interesting question. I think there are different possibilities for this model, okay? And I'm working on that with colleagues. That one of the benefits of working in a business school is I will have colleagues with more of a business perspective than I have. So first of all, I will use your question, or rather that would be rude. I will start by answering your question, and then I will generalize the point, okay? I think it's very helpful to provide a structure, which means also give a sense of direction of where we are going here. So from the start, I don't know, sorry, somebody's microphone is really, thank you. From the start, I design a plan. So each session will actually, in principle, address a certain issue, right? So for example, in applying this model with a specific group, just to illustrate, I think there are in numerous possible variations. It will depend on the moment, it will depend on the group, but I started, these are business executives, right? So they, even though they must, as a human being, think critically every day, and they must deal with ethical dilemmas every day, again, their experience, and I reinforce that, their experience have a lot of value. They are facing the gun. We are not. We are only working with what they bring us. But having said that, they don't have any kind of technical training in critical thinking. They don't have any technical training, or most of them, in properly dealing with ethical dilemmas, decision making, and stuff like that. So what I did was just start with a general. Session one was a kind of critical thinking experience. From drawing from, I made one proposition, which was one basic thought. So let's understand a decision in terms of an intention that becomes action. We're not talking about just ideas. We're talking about a decision is an intention that becomes practical in your life. So I proposed that as a kind of framework. And it was also the first meeting. There's this breaking the ice kind of job. So it was a space for them to just start sharing. And I made little provocations in terms of how they understood critical thinking, and I would react to that and so on. But to answer the first one, I framed around the idea of decision-making process. Another one I framed around the idea of dealing with ethical dilemmas. Another one I framed in terms of the idea of, as one of those executives called the pains of society. So it's kind of taking this whole dealing with ethical dilemmas to a broader perspective in terms of the relationship of the company and society, and specifically their relationship as a business executives with society. And also because in the middle of a pandemic like this, and the idea of crisis in general, as have been said, the Chinese understanding of crisis, it inherently involves necessarily the potential of opportunity. One session was dedicated to which opportunities this particular crisis presents us with, both in terms of as individuals and in terms of society as a whole. So I would provide a structure, a sense of structure. It also helps, not only guides, it gives security for them to, okay, we are business executives, they kind of, most of them need some kind of structure. They feel much more relaxed if they feel they can rely on some structure. But having said that, I do have the flexibility of allowing what to emerge to become an important focus of the session and of the work as a whole. So I think it's important to leave some room to accommodate what emerges, because each person is a particular person, and also each group is a particular group that is living in a particular point in time. So yeah. Oh, to complement, I said first your question and then broadening. I think this can be directed towards specific aims as well. So one aim is we can, for executives in general, talk about dealing with crisis through this work, but we can aim the work towards a group of HR executives, in the sense that not only that will help them to deal with the crisis more productively, but that will develop their own capacity to support the respective executives of their companies. And this is just one illustration. There are other possibilities as well. But wonderful question, Ezra. As I wouldn't expect any different from you.
I mean, I had another just short comment, which was just that you said that you were looking at this and targeting this specifically at senior executives, but I think that the whole approach is much more versatile than that, and it doesn't need to be restricted in that way. So just a comment.
Yeah, great.
I had a more philosophical question as well, but I'll leave space for other people.
That's the Ezra that I know.
It was just a kind of an observation about the philosophical approach that you're taking, and I wanted to hear your thoughts about it. And I don't, just to be clear, I don't think there's anything wrong with this approach, but I found it interesting. So you're taking this virtue ethical approach, and traditionally, at least within virtue ethics, the focus is on what kind of person should I be, what kind of life should I live.
Okay.
And I found it interesting that you're combining that with the aims of the sessions on decision making and what should I do, which is a much more contemporary, much more sort of typically modern ethical approach and ethical focus.
Yeah.
So it was just, I don't think that those are necessarily mutually exclusive, but I was just interested that you're combining them in that way. So I wondered what your thoughts are.
Yeah, so that's I think that's a great observation, and I have an explanation for it actually that is very pragmatic, and I think for the group that we started yesterday, it's an interesting observation. So I started the work precisely. I have been developing this since last year. Okay. When I first started developing it, I had precisely the same intuition that you just mentioned, and that was my focus. Now, again, the benefits of being in a business school, it has disadvantages, but it also has advantages. So I shared this work, this model with colleagues of mine, other professors. Some of them didn't have much to add, but some of them did. Some of them did. And one of them said, André, what you are suggesting is absolutely beautiful. It is an extraordinary contribution. And mind you, this is a strategy professor that have a very respectable understanding of philosophy. He even incorporates it in he's not alien to philosophy at all, right? So he said, just to make it as a kind of short answer, he said, André, you need to make it palatable for them. You need to help them help you. Depending on the way you phrase this thing, uh, they will not see, again, business executives tend to be very pragmatic. Depending on how you phrase it, you will have two problems. It will make it hard for them to see the value. Yeah, it's a beautiful idea how to live my life and all that, but I need to pay my bills right now and have decisions to make today. So it will make it harder for them to see the value of it, and uh, you will put them in a difficult position. Because I was aiming at senior executives, it would put them in a very difficult position if you frame the solution in such a way that if they want to be a part of it, they must publicly say that they have a problem. For example, in terms of I have an ethical conflict or whatever. That will be, in practical terms, a barrier for them to participate in the solution, even if they want to. They are careful about this kind of stuff. And at the same time, it's very obvious to them the value of being better at making decisions, because that's what they do every day, all day long. So I just framed it in a way that would be more palatable to them. And that's why I keep saying throughout the presentation, the lecture, the main focus, the explicit work is developing the decision-making capacity and developing the capacity to deal with ethical dilemmas. But really, we as practitioners know that the real work that is happening in the background is, to summarizing the idea, is a human flourishing. So yeah, that is what took me to take that route, making it more palatable. Easy to swallow.
I mean, it doesn't have to be contradictory, of course, because
oh yeah,
it seems not unreasonable to think that by practicing making decisions well and by practicing being sensitive to the ethically relevant features of the situations that confront you, you develop yourself into the kind of person that is good at making decisions, and applying the correct virtues that are appropriate to situations, that sort of thing. So
yeah. But yeah. Any other questions or comments? Or if not, I will just add. If yes, please come in. If not, I will just ask Nastia, if you could, what I would like? For you to select which question from the chat you believe is the most interesting one. If you'd be so kind as to do that.
Actually, in the chat, we had very nice discussion. So, and I think that all questions are answered. Probably, yeah. Alexandra, probably, would you like to say something now? Leon, and you participated in a discussion. Probably you would like to say something out loud.
Well, it was a question from Leon. And I think he was interested mostly to hear what André has to say about this. So,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
You can. I
Let
don't know
me.
whether Leon is still here or you can read it out otherwise.
Okay, I'll read it out loud. So, the question from Leon: what perspective, importance does the philosopher take? Crises often reveal conflicts of interest within the management and personnel. I mean, philosophical practices, political positioning within the power relations and conflicts of interest within the business organization.
So, sorry, Nastia, that was too fast for me. Could you please?
Actually, you can find it in a chat. It's not so.
What is the time? What time?
2:48.
Yeah. I just have Moscow time.
Oh shit! Yeah, I have Brazil 2:48 UK time. You mean?
I don't know what.
That's a question from Leon Haas.
Leon.
If I'm right in my pronunciation.
Okay, yeah. I'm looking for it right now.
Importance does the philosopher take?
It's just above Andrei Pavlov question.
Well, actually, I think there are two different.
Okay. I'm confused. Yeah, please, Alexandra, please.
No, I mean, if you can see the question, it's fine. But otherwise, if it may save time, Leon's question was about how should because a philosopher who works in a corporate setting inevitably will find themselves in a situation of a conflict of interests between some parties within the business. So if you're helping them to make decisions, yeah. So if you think that philosopher may be a counterparty to make decisions to executives, and if you find yourself in a situation of a conflict of interests, how do you handle that? How do you handle this political sensitivity within the corporation?
Meaning, so there is a decision to be made and you find yourself in between two agents that have different interests.
Exactly.
Yeah. Well, the first thing I have to say, what very clearly occurs to me is that it's not my place, and in general, the practitioner's place to make decisions. The executives are making decisions. We can enlighten and support the decision-making process by making provocation, by provoking, making certain questions and bringing in certain images and insights to help the reflection of the decision making process there. But I don't see the job of the practitioner as one of making, and I actually had something similar happen in the group. So one of the group in which I applied the model, he's really trying to make things right. That's very obvious, right? So he mentioned a situation in which the boss was harassing the person that was under his, bossship. I don't know how to say that in English. And he kind of tolerated the situation. He tried to fight, to managed it in all sorts of ways, but it became unbearable. And precisely because he wants to create the appropriate conditions in the company, the appropriate atmosphere and space, he decided in the end of the process to fire the boss. Okay. And then he mentioned in the group that he hired an external expert on the women's inclusion and something like that from ONG. And he mentioned that that external professional expert said, oh, you shouldn't have fired them because of these, this, and those, which made him surprised because, he was trying to promote precisely what this ONG was trying to promote. But with the best of intentions, she suggested you should not have fired them. And she added, if I was, because she was hired by the company afterwards, if I was already working for the company, I would have not allowed you to fire them. I consciously chose to be kind of indelicate with a colleague that I don't even know, and very, very strongly mentioned that it was not her place to not allow you to fire the person. It was her place to support you in making a good decision. And she did made some good points, and I brought attention to those points, like maybe you could have listened both sides and blah, 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 and blah, blah, blah. But why I was so emphatic about this? This was already a guy that was clearly trying to make things right. He's trying to develop himself into someone, precisely as Ezra said, that he's trying to bring himself to be in a position of being able to deal with these situations. And he is already extremely, extremely guilty about all of his past choices, because now he can see them from a different angle. So adding up to the guilt and robbing him of his autonomy, it's his responsibility, like it's his job description. It was his job to make the decision, not the external expert. So I guess that's...
Yeah, thank you. Probably the last question.
Yeah, I think you've answered Leon's question perfectly.
Yeah, and also there is a question from André Pavlov. I think that he went away. Yeah, it's time. It was time for him. But his question you can see at the end of the chat, so you could read it yourself. Yeah.
I see. Yeah. So the question of reducing the teaching of philosophy in most management programs to business ethics. Okay. Two comments about that. There's a difference between what the business executives, there are three distinctions. One is what the executive thinks he's asking for, is one thing. Another thing is what he's actually asking for. And the third thing is what will actually fulfill the needs that originated the asking. Okay? So, first of all, a quick parenthesis to say I understand the question because not only it's reduced generally to business ethics, but business ethics understood in a very, very narrow way. It's not effective, it's problematic, intellectually speaking. It's a little bit like understanding Nietzsche's critique of a certain kind of morality or approach to morality as a critique to ethics as a whole, like that whole thing should be thrown to the trash. It's the similar kind of thing. So first of all, I think there are different kinds of approach, broader to ethics applied in the context of business, that is much more interesting and enriching than the traditional literature on business ethics suggests. Second of all, might I suggest that you be a bit tricky, you be a bit sneaky in the way that you approach this thing. Of course, there is a line that you shouldn't cross, so you need to mind the line. But I'm saying this in this kind of very enthusiastic way because there is a colleague of ours, a South African philosopher that actually became the dean of a respected business school in South Africa. And he also happens to be a professor of ethics. And we had so much fun talking because, you know, how to do the teaching in business schools, what should we do? We both take the exact same approach. We wrap up the philosophical content. Again, the point of making it palatable. We wrap up the philosophical content in a way that will be attractive to the students. And sometimes we will be like profoundly discussing ethics without saying that that's what we're doing. So one practical example is, at least in Brazil, but I think it's a broader than Brazil, this thing. The business executives at the moment love the idea of purpose, having a purpose. How can I have a purpose and all that? Of course, they tend to understand that in a very narrow way, but that's a different chapter. That's where philosophers' contribution come in. But so what usually we'll do is people will talk, the people that are teaching about purpose in business schools, they will do without a proper depth, without proper justification, kind of clumsily. So what I do is, there are some notions that I would like to share. I think it will be helpful to the executives if I share them, some of which are proper ethical notions, and I wrap it up in terms of a course on purpose, which they are already asking for anyway. So it's slightly sneaky, but it's the solution I found, and I must say, it's also the solution that this colleague of ours from South Africa that have been teaching philosophy and ethics, in particular in business school for a long time, he said, André, there's simply no other way to do it. It's very effective when you do it this way. there's a line to be minded. So please don't cross the line. But yeah, thank you, everyone.
Thank you, André.
Thank you so much, André.